Hello and good evening. I'm Melisa Idris. Welcome to Consider This. This is the show where we want you to consider and then reconsider what you know of the news of the day. In recent months, Malaysia has witnessed an unsettling surge in crimes against children, be it violence, aggression, or even abuse and neglect. Now, as reports of these crimes continue to rise, so do questions about how effectively our society is protecting its youngest members. Could we be doing more to prevent these tragic incidents? And what roles should schools, families, and the law play in addressing this growing concern? Joining me in today's episode as we investigate the alarming increase in child-related violence and the steps needed to change this disturbing trend, I have in the studio with me Dr Farah Nini Dusuki, Children's Commissioner to SUHAKAM. Dr Farah, thank you for being on the show with me. It's good to have you here.
Pleasure's mine.
And as I mentioned, the troubling increase in crime that we've seen, cases, particularly cases of violent crime towards children. What are your thoughts on this? What do you believe to be maybe some of the primary factors driving this worrying trend?
Many factors, Melissa. Thank you for the invitation. Well, I would say that children are the easiest prey, isn't it? They are vulnerable, they are defenseless, and in many instances, the perpetrators are people known to them. So it depends on what type of crimes you're talking about. If you're talking about sexual abuse or child abuse that happen within this safe haven of a house, then chances are the perpetrators will be people who are known to the child. And the lower the age of the child, the more defenseless the child is, simply because what is been done may not be known to the child that it's wrong. Yeah, so that's why it's very important to empower children in the first place.
Okay, so let's talk about that. And I think some of the recent cases, the one that was really troubled a lot of parents because it hit kind of close to home was the case of the 6-year-old who went missing in Iskandar Puteri in Johor, Albertine Leo, I think. Okay. Can you talk to me a little bit about what we can draw from that? What did Albertine's story teach us about protecting girls, particularly in this society?
Well, first and foremost, we cannot deny the most important role of the caretaker, the parents, who is with the child. So that is why there are a number of provisions in the Child Act which talks about the enforcement of these roles. Mean to say that if you act negligently against a child, and whatever actions can be taken against you. So in that situation, however, being a parent myself, you can be watching your child 24/7, but you know, things can still happen. So that is why it is very important, number one, for parents to take all the necessary measures first, you know, to ensure that, you know, they keep their eye on their children, they put safety measures in place. If they cannot be there for their child, then who's the next adult who's there looking after the child? And the next one will be the society. Now, surely, when Albertine was abducted, you know, I'm sure there will be signs of restlessness or unhappiness, and surely there will be somebody who would have seen that, isn't it? Like, for instance, what happened to the late Kenny Ong? Okay, she was an adult, but they were, you know, they were news to say that, you know, she looked distressed, but nobody actually did anything then.
Right.
You see, so. That's the role of the next layer.
It's the role of the kind of the responsibility of the witness, right?
Correct.
I 100% agree with you. When we think about protecting our children, it should be a community effort. But that's not really the way we live nowadays. It's no longer it takes a village to raise a child, right? We often don't know our neighbors, and in this kind of urban lifestyle, we are essentially strangers to each other.
True. Getting more nucleus, isn't it?
How do we think about that when we think about children, protecting children's safety as a collective responsibility?
No, I think again it starts from home. You know, that we shouldn't be too self-centered. You know, life is not just about us alone. It's all about people around us. So that's why even when I talk to children, I tell them that they should be their ears and eyes for each other. You see, when I talk to very young children, I said it's very important that, you know, depending on their ages, of course, when they're primary school children, even secondary school children, you know, it's very important that you are the ears and eyes for your friends, because chances are they have no other next person to tell what's happening to them, you know. So if you notice somebody who seems a bit distressed, you need to reach out, because you really cannot expect, I mean, a lot of expectations is put on the government, but if you have, for example, just a counsellor for a whole school, can you imagine how is that probable, you know, in terms of...
This is what you were mentioning earlier about empowering the child.
Definitely, yes.
Are children nowadays still being educated about stranger danger? Is that something that we need to highlight?
We need to highlight, and I think it's not done enough. You know, for example, sexuality education, officially it starts in year 5, but there are cases whereby children, you know, are being hurt as young as 7 or 8, for example. So that's why we have to start, and we have started this initiative with the different ministries that handle childcare centres, early childhood education. And you know, in my role, I realised that it's not just the Ministry of Women, but it is also the Ministry of Unity, for example. They have their Tabika Perpaduan, I don't know how to translate that, and you have the rural ministry, you know, which handles all this kemas and the different, you know, the different childcare centres, and we want to train the teachers to train children to just 2 things. Number 1, to identify what are safe and unsafe touches, and number 2, when they feel uncomfortable and the touch is unsafe, to go run and tell. Just 2 messages. You see, and at the same time, we need to also educate the adults. You see, we need to tell them that, look, when it is sexual abuse, they have no choice. Under Section 19 of the Sexual Offences Against Children Act, it is a mandatory duty to report to the police. So, for example, Melissa, if your niece comes and tell you that somebody has touched her in a wrong way, yes, you have the obligation to actually lodge a police report.
Okay.
Failure to do that will subject you to a fine of 2,000 ringgit.
Has that been well received? I mean, the initiative to go and kind of build capacity in the adults and the caretakers of children, so they understand the responsibility, but also to impart this knowledge, right?
Sure,
you need to, you yourself need to be equipped to teach children what is safe, unsafe touch, what is stranger danger and the like.
Exactly, yes. That's why you need to empower, you know, we call it training of the trainers.
Training of the trainers.
Training of the trainers, because they need to be confident about it as well, you know, because in Malaysia, some subjects are still regarded as taboo. You know, parents don't want to talk about safe and unsafe touches, you know, don't even want to hear the word sexuality education, for instance, because they feel that it's teaching children how to do sex. But it's really not that, isn't it? It's about protecting yourself, it's about identifying what's right and what's wrong, what are the boundaries, and therefore they can, you know, they can actually go out and tell somebody.
Do you find that children are still not believed when they...
Oh yes, definitely.
When they tell an adult?
That's why the Act was recently passed, to the Evidence of Child Witness Act, to put child witnesses on the same status as adult witnesses, because initially the law says that until and unless the child is deemed to be competent to testify, you know, whatever that he or she says has to be corroborated by some other independent evidence. Now, who would commit sexual abuse
in front of other people?
Exactly.
In front of witnesses, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So you will not have any corroborative evidence, right? So we question, why is it that when children are put on stand, they have to undergo all these limitations, whereas adults do lie. I mean, we have charges for perjury against adults who lie on the witness stand. So fortunately, the Act was passed unanimously in Parliament in the last sitting. So now at least that hurdle is passed, because even if we bring cases to the court, the prosecution and the rate of conviction is very, very low.
Right.
Because of lack of evidence again.
So that was a big win for children's rights.
That's
for
right.
Children's
30 years.
evidence and testimony to be held in equal measure.
Equal measure as
was there any kind of pushback? Was it just kind of time for us to believe children when they say something has happened to them? Was there pushback in thinking that, oh, children should not be believed, they can lie on this?
Believe it or not, Melissa, because of a case law in 1960 which stated that children has a tendency to fantasize and fabricate, and you know, and that is why we cannot believe them as much as we believe adults.
1960 though.
Yes, I know, right? And a lot of studies have been done to say that children do not fantasize bad events. They fantasize to be princess, you know, they fantasize to be, you know, to be queens and you know, whatever that's nice, and celebrities like you, Melisa, but then they don't fantasize to be abused. They don't fantasize when they describe a terrible incident that's happened to them. So why do we want to question them?
Okay, all right. So this is a big step forward, and hopefully we will see more children's testimony being taken, and more justice for child victims and survivors. I also wanted to talk to you, Dr. Farah, about another aspect of child safety that we often neglect to consider as really harmful and dangerous, which is child safety on the road.
Oh, yes.
And it has been several cases that innocent young lives are lost or jeopardized because of our lack of kind of taking this issue more seriously.
Yes, definitely. And in fact, this issue is serious, so serious that it is one of my office, the OCC, Office of the Children's Commissioner, work plan for 2024, because we feel that we cannot wait anymore. You know, people get alarmed when they hear the news, then after that it dies down. But in totality, in 13 years, in the past 13 years, there have actually been 2,900 deaths of below 15, involving children who were motorcyclists. Not children who ride motorbikes with their parents, but who are motorcyclists themselves.
So they're not pillion riders. They are taking their motorbikes for a joyride.
Yes, certainly. I mean, just last month, you know, on the 10th of August, we heard about the 16-month-old baby who was drowned because the brother, you know, held her while riding a three-wheel bike. You know, and got into this stream, and the baby, you know, got drowned. That's one incident, and the boy was 12 years old. Just 5 days after that was the news that, you know, that two boys, 12-year-old, they were doing the wheelie ride somewhere, I think in Elmina near Sungai Buloh, and they collided into each other, and again, both of them died. So many questions come to my mind. Number one, why are they on motorbikes in the first place? Because the law says you have to be 16 to be on the motorcycle, to be able to have a license to ride a motorbike. Number two, what are they doing at that hour, you know, riding in that manner? I'm sure that's not the first time. You see, so the next question would be, where are the parents? And why are we not, you know, going after parents who willfully neglect their children in such a way? Because we have two offences created for this kind of acts omission by parents. Number one is Section 31 of the Child Act, which makes it an offence for any forms of child abuse, including parents or caretakers who has neglected. And you know, who has neglected are the two words that were added in 2016 to accommodate for situations such as this. They have acted negligently, bertindak secara cuai. You know, it's not just a mere omission, you know, like not giving food and all that, but also in a situation whereby they are supposed to be monitoring their children and they fail to do so, and something bad happened. You see, but in Malaysia, I think the society is such that, oh well, sudah jatuh ditimpa tangga.
Exactly, there is a reluctance to charge parents for negligence, right? Because they've already gone through such a tragedy, or when something tragic happens, that it actually, there is a kind of collective feeling in society that it would be more bad luck or
Sure. So why not go before that happened? I mean, go
as
around.
A deterrent.
Yes, correct. I mean, I think about 8 years ago, what happened in Johor, you know, the bicycle lajak incidents, whereby I think about 8 children died, and they were between 8 to 15 years old again. You know, and a lot of attention was made to was given to the driver. You know, a lot of feelings against the driver when she was really riding in the court found that she was really riding normal speed and all that, and couldn't really foresee that there were kids racing among themselves. Again, the conversation was never about what were the children doing at that wee hours of the night, you know, but the conversation has always been, oh, we have to go after this driver who caused the death of the 8 children. So I think there is this mismatch in our society about, you know, not wanting to put responsibility on people who are accountable, you know, for their own children, but really wanting to find fault elsewhere.
So so you say, looking at child road safety is going to be a key pillar of your office next year. So talk to me about that. How do we address this? Because to address it, we have to kind of diagnose the problem. And a lot of the problem is maybe cultural practices, the mindset of, you know, letting a teenager jump on a motorbike to run an errand around the corner or to pick up someone from school. How do you plan to address it or tackle it head on?
I mean, maybe people are not aware, but we already have the necessary mechanisms in place. We have MIROS. That is the Institute for Road Safety in Malaysia, and then they have done. I was just Googling this morning, you know, in 2022, they actually did a study on bicycle lajak incidents, you see. So why are we not using all this output and deliverables of this evidence-based data to actually come up with a more comprehensive solution? And you know, I mean, they're not really, it's not rocket science. You see, number one, I feel that we need to enforce the law more stringently. You see, in terms of putting accountability on parents, I think we should do that, because even police officers are complaining. If they were to seize the motorbikes away, you know, as a form of punishment, right? Nobody comes and try to get that back because they'll be fined 300 ringgit. You see, so they would rather, you know, lose the bike than pay summons and also a criminal record register, right? Yeah, but then again, you see, so it's a no-win situation that way. But if we are going to have like a test case saying that this is serious, and the government is not going to tolerate, you see, this kind of lack of accountability on the part of parents, you know, for allowing all this to happen, then I think it would be a strong test case for other parents in the future. Okay, so
to see whether stricter enforcement could be a deterrent. I do wonder, okay, where the kind of mindset, the cultural aspect of this, because if we think about, you know, in the kampung, a 13-year-old riding a bike to pick up, you know, a couple of groceries at the nearest kedai is not unheard of. In fact, it's kind of commonplace. But when it happens also in the city centre, there's dangers with traffic. How do we make this a more important issue? I think the gravity of the situation is not impressed upon parents and teenagers themselves, right? It's also like, I can ride a bike, can you?
Yes, correct. Not just that, Melissa, but you know, another worrying trend is also that in Sabah and Sarawak, and even in some parts of Semenanjung as well, you have issues about if they don't ride the bike, they don't go to school. Because schools are actually more than 10-15 kilometers away from their home. And you know, when you are really in the outskirts of Sabah and Sarawak, you see, probably that's the only way to get to school. You see, so that's another situation whereby it's not something that they want to do, you know, but then it's something that is not just convenient but needful, because right to education is also something that we uphold.
There is a gap there that is solved by riding bikes.
Correct, but again, maybe what we can consider, and this has been brought to MIROS as well, that we can only allow a certain capacity bike, you know, like less than 70cc. I mean, like in other developed countries, that's what they do, you know, to allow teenagers to handle motorbikes, but of a lower cc, so that they cannot really do what happened in Elmina, for instance, to go for a race, for instance. You know, it's just for purpose of getting you from point A to point B. So perhaps that is another way to look at it. But again, of course, to change cultural mindset, I feel that of course takes time, and you know, we need to work more. We need to work closely with in every district there is this thing called child protection teams, child welfare teams under the Child Act. You know, so perhaps more effort needs to be galvanized, you know, to put all these mechanisms in place so that we can heighten the awareness that you cannot take this for granted.
Do you think it is a controversial statement to say that you would like to see stronger enforcement against negligent parents? How do you kind of qualify that and push for that to happen?
Well, of course, in any case, you know, before taking people, or rather before prosecuting someone via the criminal way, there will be a lot of considerations. And again, there is this tricky question when it's negligence. There is a very thin line between negligence and accidents. If you recall, a few years ago, a few years ago, there was this sad case involving a girl named Nurin Jazlin, who was abducted when she went to Pasar Malam near her house, you know, and she was found in a bag about a week later. Now, in that case, this matter actually came up, you know, because it was the head police, the chief police officer who actually said that, well, we have no problems in enforcing the law on parental negligence. And I was called, I think it was also by AWANI that time, to actually speak on this. And I said, now there's a thin line between accident and negligence. Now, if parents have taken all measures, like in that case, the parents have already set the ground rules, you know, that you're not supposed to be walking alone. And she actually went with her older sister earlier and came back. But there was that pulling factor, you know, that she said she needed to go alone, and there was visitors at the house that night, and she went and she was gone. You see, so in that situation, it would be unfair, isn't it, to charge the parent when they have taken all the necessary measures to ensure that, you know, something like that would not happen. But for something like bicycle lajak to have taken place, there is a stage of preparation, you know, for the bicycle to be and able to be in a
It wasn't a spontaneous, impromptu thing.
Exactly, you know, so that cannot be accidental. So for that, you know, you can charge for negligence.
Does the law make a distinction between negligence?
Yes, at the point of deciding to prosecute, and of course in trial later.
One of the things I think few of us really think about is that negligence is a form of abuse. It's considered a form of abuse, whether intentionally or unintentionally, and is a contributing factor to crimes and violence and aggression against children, right?
But like you say, it's very hard, isn't it? Because a lot of times in Malaysia, people are put in situations like poverty, like, you know, like if you recall the case that took place, which burned down and killed 21 Tahfiz students and their teachers in Keramat, not too far away, several years ago. You know, when we looked at the perpetrators, you see, we saw that the children's parents, many of them were, some had both parents, but a number of them, you know, were raised by single moms. And this particular single mom that a friend of mine spoke to, she spent every night looking for her son. You see, so you see, how can you, you know, how can you punish someone who is so deprived and depraved, you know, for neglecting when society has not
that
done
makes
their
your
role.
job doubly hard, because you can empathize with the family, but you're also advocating for the child, the voiceless, and their rights.
Correct.
So 1.5 years now in this role.
Yes, in September. Yes.
Have you seen the landscape, the conversation about child rights during your time shift? Has it evolved? Has it progressed?
I feel it has evolved, but you know, as any child rights advocate feel, a lot more needs to be done. You know, in terms of the law, I think we are moving at the right pace. But I think in terms of enforcement of the law, there's a lot to do. So that's why we're engaging with the police officers, like for instance, portraying children in mass media. You know, again, that is going right against Section 15 of the Child Act, but people are doing it so blatantly, journalists are doing it blatantly. So we take a multi-pronged effect. You know, we are meeting the Persatuan Media, we are also engaging with journalists, you know, to say that don't do this, it's wrong. And I have been giving out press statements on this matter, and also been meeting the head of the chief of police investigation, crime investigation unit, and it says anytime you want to lodge a police report, we are, you know, we'll support you. But then again, that is the balance that you need to, you know, to handle. That, you know, in situations whereby people are so deprived that things happen, and you know, so that again will fall on the prosecution to actually determine, isn't it? Like, what are the factors? Because in 10 cases, they will not be charging maybe 80%.
Right.
Yeah,
but they can't charge all 10.
They can't charge all 10. But then if you can charge at least 1 or 2, that will give a strong signal that, you know, we are serious about enforcing responsibilities and accountability. And I think that goes a long way towards ensuring child safety in situations where it is so preventable. Okay.
All right. So what is coming up? What is the focus of your office moving forward? What will you be fighting for, championing next?
Well, definitely to still go on this strong promotion of children's rights, going on the ground to empower people, telling them, what is right and what is wrong in terms of, children's rights, like, you cannot take your child out of school, for example, just to help you work, because under the Education Act, it's compulsory to go to school when they're in primary level. Yeah, many people don't know that. They say, they need help with at plantations, for example, and that's child labor, you see. So you see, we have all these laws in place, but enforcement is really another big issue. And in between will be, a lot of advocacy, a lot of, educating people, and a lot of support as well. You see, if we want to ensure that people can actually comply, you see, we need to support them. And I think that's the more difficult part. You see?
Well, thank you so much for being on the show, highlighting these really important issues, and I hope that it brings it to the forefront a little bit more. Thank you so much, Melisa. That's all we have for you on this episode of Consider This. I'm Melisa Idris, signing off the evening. Thank you so much for watching, and good night.